What is reality? Reality is what we believe to be true about the nature of our surroundings. But how do we come to decide that true nature? Do we conceive it completely on our own? Or do other devices gently sway our thoughts onto a pre-decided path? This is the hard question we must all ask ourselves as free humans on this planet. New skulls rule reality.
Reality. Hey guys, what's up? It's Wednesday night. Time for another wonderful edition of Reality Brief.
I'm Dan.
I'm Don.
And yeah, we're here to brief you guys on all the latest happenings with the secret space program. We got some space news. We got some stuff about weaponizing space-time.
We got our guest Kevin coming up. He's going to be talking a little bit about, kind of expanding on what he was talking about last time. And some of the paranormal type events that he experienced. And, yeah, I mean, I guess that's about it. Let's see if we can go ahead
the size of it.
See if we can go ahead and figure out how to get him in there. Kevin, you with us tonight?
Yeah, I can see and hear you guys. What's
Great.
up?
Glad
Awesome,
to have
man.
you, buddy.
Thanks for coming back on. It's been
Yeah,
a while,
thanks.
man. What you been up to?
Well, yeah, I guess I can just jump right in. Last time we spoke was first week of March, and things were kind of quiet for a while after that. I was trying to stay under the radar, and something happened in June, first week of June. A friend of mine came down to my new place and to do a cleanse, like a week-long fasting cleanse. So, but just prior to that, he had seen this psychic, clairvoyant lady, and she said to him, she cautioned him and warned him not to go out wandering into fields, and because there were ETs that could use him. That's all she said.
Well, I hope it's not like cow mutilation type deal there.
Well, yeah,
I'm sure. I would hope not, but
that was, yeah, because there's the cattle mutilation thing.
Yeah.
I'm living out in the country right now, so there's there's fields everywhere, like farmers' fields, and my friend hadn't been down to my place yet, and so a couple days prior, he went and saw this clairvoyant lady, and she warned him, like, don't go wandering into fields at night because there's ETs that could use you and want to use you. But at the time, he just thought, like, well, because he lives in the city, he's like, well, I don't think it's very likely that I'll be wandering out into a farmer's field in the middle of the night. But then, of course,
how about parking lots?
Showing up at my place, and he realized that I lived like in a farming town with it's just got like 3,000 people in it. It's a little farming community surrounded by farmers' fields. So he's like, oh, this is kind of eerie, or synchronistic, I guess. And so a couple days went by, and we were cleansing, and we decided that because I'm 10 minutes from Lake Erie, so we decided to go to the beach to have a fire overnight. We ended up walking to this part of the beach where you can, like a secluded cove away from the public access beach, a couple kilometers down the way. But in order to get there, we had to cut across a farmer's field in the middle of the night and through a cornfield. So he's thinking like, oh no, this is like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So we get to the beach and we make a fire, and we're just like chilling out there, like stargazing and that. And around 1:30 in the morning, all of a sudden, further down the beach, there's this like white pulsating light, and I saw it first to my right, and I see this white pulsating light like hovering over the beach, coming towards us, and I say to my friend Josh, I'm like, oh my God, look at that! Like, what's that? What the hell is that? And he looks over, and as soon as he looks over, the light just turns off. So we're thinking like, okay, this is kind of weird, but maybe maybe it was just a person with like a flashlight or something, right? Like further down the beach. But the thing is, this is a very secluded little cove, and it was also a Monday night. So typically people aren't out like 1:30 in the morning on a Monday night walking along the beach. So we're like, okay, well that could have just been a person. But then a couple minutes later, out across the water, there's these like cliffs that on the right, and out across the water was the white pulsating light came back, but it was like hovering over the water this time. And then we also saw like a red pulsating light around it, and it's hovering like above the water, above the cliffs, and then it just slowly moves further and further out across the water. So it's at that point we're like, hey, that's not a person because it's like up in the air out over the water. But then the light turned off again, so we're getting a little freaked out, and we're like, should we stay? Should we go? And he wanted to stay, and I'm like, okay, well, if the light comes back, then I don't know, man. I think we should get out of here. And then, like, as soon as we said that, the light came back and did the same thing. It was like pulsating like up above the cliffs, and it came out across the water, and then it started coming towards us, and then it turned off again. So his like kind of excited. So he's like, oh, I want to stay. I want to see what happens. But I just got this really bad feeling because of my experiences. I got a bit triggered, and it brought up like a PTSD response because like I don't mess around with that stuff anymore.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that would have freaked me out too.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably would have assumed it was just a drone, but still, like, yeah, that's enough to put me on edge.
yeah, I mean, it could have been a drone. I mean, like I'm not sure if it was alien or not, but it was weird. Like 1:30 in the morning for someone to be flying a drone out in the middle of nowhere, out across the lake. It's the chances of that are not very likely, but still somewhat likely.
Right.
But it was just enough to freak us out a little bit. And it was also it's just interesting that the psychic, a couple days prior, she had no idea that he would be coming down to see me, right? Mm-hmm. And she basically described him like being in this field, warned him not to go into the field because there was aliens that like were watching him, basically. And there's the last part of the story too, because after the light came back a third time, I convinced him like we should hike out of here. Like I don't want to mess around with this stuff. I got a really bad feeling, and so we like marched out of there like through the field in the middle of like the night, and we make it to the road, and then we walk all the way to the parking lot where the public access beach was, and so we're driving back to my place now, and now it's like 2 a.m. on a Monday night, and all of a sudden this white SUV with like really bright high beams with their high beams on starts tailgating us out of nowhere like as soon as we pulled out of there. And it follows us all the way through the country back into town, and Josh is the one driving. And then he turns down my street, and sure enough, it follows me down my street, which is like a little dead-end street. And it parks just a couple houses down from my place. So we get out at my place, we go into the living room, and this guy's just shining his high beams like into my living room for like 15-20 minutes, just idling his car. And just shining his lights into my living room at 2 a.m. Wow. So it was kind of like a gang stalking situation, because it was pretty eerie. Like you know what I mean? Like 2 a.m. in that little like farm town, after like seeing basically a UFO, an unidentified flying object, and then being followed home by a white SUV with their high beams on that like shines the lights into your living room at 2 a.m. for like 15-20 minutes. It was bizarre. So that was something that happened more recently.
Now, it seems like you got a pretty good handle on times there, so there was no missing time associated with that event, with those lights or anything?
I don't think so. We were pretty conscious. I mean, we were on the beach. We weren't drinking or anything like that. So we were like, because we're doing a cleanse, so we were like fully sober and very, very aware of our surroundings. And no, I don't think we experienced missing time. I think it was just, it could have been some kind of drone. Right. That like had us like under observance, and then we ended up being followed home in the middle of the night, and they definitely made their presence known with shining their lights into my living room just to let us know that make their presence known.
So
yeah.
Is that area associated with any type of military activity, bases or anything like that?
I'm not really sure. There's no bases I know of, but being like Lake Erie, across Lake Erie is Ohio.
Okay, so you're talking about on Lake Erie. I'm sorry, I must have missed that part.
Yeah, it was on the beach, Lake Erie. So one of the Great Lakes that borders.
Okay, I was just picturing a little lake out in the middle. I wasn't picturing Lake Erie.
Right.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So yeah, that's something that happened more recently, and then things kind of were quiet after that for most of the summer, and then something happened in first week of September. And what happened was I just got this feeling at like 3 a.m. to go outside. And I go out into my backyard, and it's like a really clear night. I can see the stars, especially where I'm like living in the country and close to the lake. There's not much light pollution, so it's like a beautiful, crisp, starry sky at night. And so I'm looking at these stars, and then I see these three. It looks like three stars at first, but then they start moving, and as it's moving, it covers up like another star in behind, and I realize it's actually a black triangle moving across the night sky. And it was kind of it was trippy because it took me a second, because at first I thought it was just three stars, a constellation I didn't recognize, and then it started, you know what I mean, like moving across the sky, and it was very clearly a black triangle. So I got a little freaked, and so I like start walking back inside, and I take a look back, and then I realize that it's much closer now. And as I got closer, the center was on one side it was a circle, but one side it was a red light, and on the other side it was a blue light in the center, and it was actually the center was lit up, and I could see a red and blue light with as well as the three white lights on the edge, and it was coming towards me. So I go into the house, and I'm just kind of like standing there, and kind of freaked out, and you know what I mean, not sure what to do. And I must have stood inside like for about an hour, because eventually I went back outside to see if it was still there, and it wasn't. So around dawn, I decided to go to bed once it was light outside. So I went to bed, and what was strange is I had this recall when I was dreaming, and I think it's linked to this this black TR3, which is the first time I've seen a black Astra, like an American.
Right, the one that you got picked up in was white, right?
Yeah, it was white
initially.
Yeah, it was originally the one I've experienced with. It was a white one. It was much smaller than this black one. So it's the first time I've seen a black TR3, and so yeah. So when I
saw it was black. I saw one over Highway 64, probably summertime 2004, and it was really cloudy out. So like around here, you have a lot of low cloud cover, and the sky gets this weird purple, orangey, light pollution-y color, and you could just see the outline of it, and it was really like it was just a silhouette, and then there was one light at each point, and a big light in the middle, and it was moving real slow and kind of spinning, real lazily on the central axis, and it was like, maybe it looked like maybe a few hundred feet in the air, like.
Yeah, that's similar to like what I saw. The way it was moving, it seemed like it was moving slowly, but it was making up like quite a bit of distance very quickly, and yet it's just because it was so silent. You know what I mean? So it's just like cruising, through the sky towards me when I saw it. And but by the way, the one you saw, what was the light in the center? Was it white, or what color was the center?
No, it was a small red light.
Red light.
It was, but it was bigger and brighter than bigger and brighter than there was a white light at each point.
Yeah.
And it was bigger and brighter than the white lights.
It wasn't brighter, but it seemed to be larger.
Yeah, the one I saw had a larger light in the center, and it was like a circle that cut in half. One side of it was red, one side of it was blue. It's interesting that you also the center was at least red for the one you saw, because there's a lot of different models at this point.
I'm wondering if it's got something to do with the engine. So what? And while we're on the subject, I know it's probably not the last thing that you want to try to get into, but those have an engine on each corner, right?
The one with the black Astra with the center, I know that the drive system is actually based on the center point.
Okay.
And it uses a totally different principle than the white TR3. I think the white TR3 is an electrogravitic craft, meaning the whole hull, the entire hull is polarized and is pushing up off the ground. The black Astra,
like a Hanabu.
Yeah, and then the black Astra is using a different drive system that's dependent on that center point, and then it also has the three lights on it. I might be wrong about this. I don't know much about the Astra, but From talking with Penny and Elena, they described the center of the Black Astra. That's the drive system's dependent on that center. That's where its propulsion is coming from. Whereas the white TR3, it doesn't have that center. So those are two different like propulsion systems.
Yeah, see, I was under the understanding that it was an anti-gravitic device at each corner, and that's why they made them triangular, because it was more stable.
Yeah, that's how you. Well, I know for the white one, that's how they steer it. Is they just, if you just dial back each whatever point, you can steer it that way. So you just dial down the front or that corner, and then you can steer that way. But the Black Astra is, it's a different propulsion system. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I know it's just dependent on that center. It's like a spinning center in the middle that's creating the energy for the lift. But yeah, while I'm on the topic of this, when I went to bed that night after I saw this black TR3, I had this recall of being brought into a crash retrieval, and it's the first time I've ever experienced being a part of a crash retrieval operation where I feel like it was in the States. I feel like it was in the interior of Washington State, like as in like Seattle, Washington, but in the interior, so not so closer closer to. Is it Idaho that borders Washington State? I might have that wrong. It is? Yep. Idaho? Yeah, so okay. I feel like it was in the interior, close to Idaho. I was looking quickly on Google Maps after this happened, and this was a couple weeks ago, but if I recall, I believe there's the Cabinet Mountains in Idaho, close to the border with Washington State. And I feel like
it's where Ruby Ridge is.
Sorry, what was that?
That's where Ruby Ridge is.
Okay, I haven't heard of that.
Google it. That's a fun one.
Yeah, it's a political thing.
Okay.
Bunch of killing by the government.
Yeah, so I feel like when I went back and remote viewed this recall, I that was like the location I got. And just to make a long story short here, I recalled driving in this Jeep with Army personnel, and I feel like this was actually like American Army. And we crossed this bridge, and I looked to the left, and there's like this little waterfall where this bridge was, and this river going down, and then on the right-hand side of the river, there was this lawn, like it looked like a campground, and then there's trees in behind, and then another tree line. And so along this river, 2 tents had been set up, and then in front of the tents were some crates, and there were like these, they looked like steel tubing with a bunch of containers inside these steel tubing crates. Kind of blocking the view of the tents, but since we were up on the road looking down, you could see the tents, but once you walk down, these crates were kind of blocking the tents in behind. I don't recall what was inside the tents, but because I was immediately brought to the other side of the tree line where there's these picnic tables, and there was this guy sitting in front of an American Army person. I'm not sure what his rank was, but seemed to be the guy in charge, and he was sitting in front of this guy at a picnic table with security personnel all around them, and they had me stand off to the side and do the empathic thing where I'm supposed to, as he was being this guy was being interrogated, I'm supposed to feel him out to make sure that he's being authentic. And the guy they were interrogating, he looked like he was 45, 50 years old. I kind of just saw his back and side profile, and he had his hair was receding, but he had long blonde hair that was going a bit gray, and it was kind of receding a bit, and he had a beard with a little bit of a beard, but more of a mustache. So more he had a mustache with kind of just a little bit of shorter scruff underneath. He was actually shirtless in jean shorts. So he was just like a camper that had literally witnessed what appeared to be some
time.
Yeah, it's so what I gathered from the experience was I think this camper had been camping along the river, and there was some kind of craft that had either touched down or had crashed, and that's where that was the two tents that were set up to contain that craft, and they were basically interrogating him, asking him, obviously like what had happened, and I was there to just feel him out to make sure he was being authentic, but it's hard for me to. I don't know if it was a crash or if the craft just touched down, made contact with the guy, and took off again, and they had the tent set up to cover up any landing tracks or whatnot. I'm not really sure because the recall ended very, very quickly after I started feeling this guy out. And the impression I got from this guy was he was just like an average Joe, like kind of, for lack of a better term, like kind of like a hick, you know what I mean? Like just kind of like just kind of like a redneck kind of dude. That was just, he was just freaking out because he had never seen anything like this. He was like completely like shaking, and he was just like, oh my, and he was telling this this army official guy who was in charge like what happened, but you could see that he was freaking out. This, whatever he had seen or witnessed, had completely destroyed his reality. He was, I'm making an assumption here, but I'm guessing he probably was maybe a Christian or something, and at his core, and then now he just witnessed aliens, and so his whole belief system and world was like coming crashing down, and he was freaking out, and but he was like an older like kind of gruff, tough dude that you wouldn't see having a breakdown like that. Yeah.
Well, a couple things come to mind. Now, is this the first time that you've had a recall of a crash recovery? Yeah,
it was first time. It was the first time that I've been around American Army, because it was always the Canadian British Commonwealth allies of Solar Warden. So this and what's significant is I witnessed the black TR3 that night, and then I waited till dawn to go to sleep because I was kind of scared to go to sleep that night. So once the sun came up, I felt a little safer, and I went to sleep. And then I have this dream of what I just described. And so I consider the two linked. I'm not sure when they grabbed me, but
the TR was like. So you think that was like a current event, or was a recall from your service?
I think that this was current. Like what I'm getting at here is I think it was actually like an American group that had picked me up basically that morning when I finally fell asleep, because they tend to grab you when you're asleep. So in the morning when I fell asleep, I think the black TR3 was still around, and that's when they picked me up. And so during my sleep, I was brought to this location to do the empathic thing with this witness as they're taking down his testimony. But it was significant because it's the first time I saw a black TR3, the first time I was serving as an empath around American personnel, Army, and so I mean, that's pretty much all I can tell you.
Yeah, from what you described, it sounds a lot like what did they call it? Operation Moondust. It's like it's basically anything that crashes the Earth. They go and it doesn't matter if it's a rock. There's a team going to investigate the rock or whatever. But the other main guy from that was I can't remember his name, but he's an older gentleman. He was part of the disclosure thing, the press conference in D.C. I guess that was early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I can't remember.
We played that video of him though. I remember the video.
I can't remember, but that seems to be the MO. Like they'll have but usually in that case anyway, the empath was used on the aliens or the ETs, whatever you want to call them. Now, this poor guy that witnessed this thing and had his world shattered here. Do you remember? Do you think they would mind wipe him? I mean, I don't know if you have any recall, because you said it ended pretty much right after that. I mean,
yeah, pretty much as soon as I finished scanning this person's emotional state. That's like I remember just kind of looking over to the tree line, and then the dream just ended there. I'm sure there's more to it. That's how much I was able to remember. And the thing about these recalls is they come back as recurring dreams. So I know eventually I'll have this experience come up again as a recurring dream, and then each time through lucid dreaming, I'll be able to pull more and more detail as I relive the memory.
Right.
So as of right now, I mean, this happened a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't had it as a recurring dream yet. So I'm describing something that happened, a dream that happened 3 weeks ago. But but what was significant is the feeling I got is those two tents that were set up. They were trying to contain something, and I know that even if the craft had just touched down and then had made contact with them and then had left again, they would do the Geiger counter and like scan for radiation, scan for as much data as they could possibly get from the actual landing site itself. So it may have not have been a crashed disc, or craft. It could have been that for whatever reason some ETs, some ET interlopers made their presence known to this guy, and like were standing in front of their craft, and then now they had put these army tents up to kind of cover up the fact that they were probably scanning that whole area where the craft had touched down.
So how large were these tents?
The tents?
Yeah.
Like I would say they were square, but they were like the size of two of them, and they were the size of like what you would rent for like a wedding. Like you could probably have 100 people in each one. Like there's these two big square tents,
kind of like
beside
the ones
each other.
They would set up in a combat zone.
Yeah, like for a field hospital or something. They're quite large. You could probably fit 100 people or 80 people in each one. So they're fairly large, and then they had all those crates set up in front of them with plastic containers that obviously had some kind of equipment and supplies in them, and they looked like the ones that the helicopters could just drop.
Right.
So that was that's a fairly significant recall, and it's interesting to me because I always thought that my service was done, and then after I did the roundtable with Anthony Zender last October, so almost a year ago now, I had that abduction experience, and it seems to be, and then after that, in December, I had my first shared recall with Anthony. So in October, after the roundtable, I was abducted by one of his handlers, and they had injected me with something. And then 2 months later, in December, I had that recall, which we've talked about before, where Anthony and I were remote viewing and tracking that submarine. And then now in September, I'm brought out as a part of this crash retrieval team. Except I was there to actually just to scan the human witness, to make sure the human witness was sharing absolutely everything with that official, because they're just worried that maybe for whatever reason that he might lie to them, right? Like just like when a cop interrogates someone, so they just want to make sure he was being honest.
Or he could have been so freaked out he couldn't admit what he saw. People will jump. You see something, you want to jump to logical conclusions for what it is, you know what I mean? Like, you see Bigfoot, it was just a bear or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because once you're that scared,
especially, there's still stigma attached. It's not as much as it used to be, but or stigma. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny you mentioned Bigfoot. I don't know if I ever shared this with you guys, but one of my recalls in the Arctic was this mission where this was in the White Tier 3. We were out in the Arctic tundra, and there's this tree line of pine trees down this sloping, kind of almost like a ski hill looking part of this hill. And we were at the top, and what happened was this Tier 3, for some reason, they had us rappel down, which is odd because they have the beaming technology. But this time they had us, being two other people, rappel down, and we had night vision goggles on, and we looked down this this hill towards the tree line, and with the night vision goggles you could see two large Bigfoot-looking, like hairy 8-foot tall Bigfoots, Sasquatch, standing at the tree line, and then in behind, further into the trees, there was 3 others in behind that you could make out with the infrared because their eyes were glowing, and but they looked so scary with the infrared because of the glowing eyes. And they're just standing there, and the impression I got from that was, they're ETs. They're absolutely extraterrestrials that come here, and secondly, it was like they could their level of technology. Most people think it's a big dumb ape left over from the last ice age, like Giantpithecus, and that's not the case. It's actually
Not at
a
all.
fully sentient extraterrestrial that's actually more advanced than we are in terms of interdimensional travel. And these things,
Oh yeah, they can hop from world to world.
exactly. And so I think the reason why they had us rappel down instead of the beaming is I think they were worried that these beings could actually interfere with the beaming technology.
Yeah.
So they weren't taking any chances with having us like beam down in front of them. They were actually they had us slowly rappel to make our presence again like known, that we were slowly coming down and we were going to stand on top of this hill and look at them, and they were going to
contact.
Try and make contact. Exactly. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because the Bigfoot thing.
Oh yeah. Well,
So-
we were listening to our buddy, or I was listening to a thing from our buddy Colin, and on Spooky Action, and he had the lady, the Zeta lady, on, and she was talking about Sasquatch, and how in fact that they've been traveling the universe for millions of years, and their technology is so advanced that you know what what's it. Who was it? Was it Heinlein who said, or Heinlein or Asimov or one of those guys that said that any sufficiently advanced technology would appear like magic to people who didn't know what was going on. And I think that Sasquatch is a case of that, to where their technology is so advanced that they're so developed telepathically and psychically and magically and everything else that they don't even need technology. They can just step sideways and be on another planet. They don't need ships.
That appears to be the case. They appear to be able to. They're like a higher density.
Arthur C. Clarke,
extraterrestrial,
thank you, Phantom Spy.
And they travel interdimensionally. Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask you real quickly. Sasquatch, Bigfoot does come up on the show quite frequently in these matters. It's interesting, but the beaming technology. I think Tony was telling us about this in the past. So now this is like a tractor technology, right? It's not like a Star Trek teleporter. Or is it?
What I'm talking about is I actually beaming's not. I mean, beaming is like using like Star Trek lingo, but I call it blinking in and out, because there is an instant transmission a teleportation device they use to beam people on and off the craft. But I call it blinking in and out because it happens so quickly that as fast as you can blink, you're already on the craft. Like, that's how fast it is. So it's actually pretty startling, because imagine like right now you blink, and then the second you blink you're somewhere else. That's how instant it is. And that's a different technology than the trip seat, or like what Tony describes as the train that he took to Mars. I think longer distances, because I have had a trip seat experience where I remember being strapped into it was like in a skyscraper, and they put us in the trip seat, and it was like that drop zone ride, except when it shot, instead of it dropping down, when it shot up, you hit like terminal velocity, and then next thing you know, when you came back down, you were actually in a different time, in a different place. But with that technology, when you actually feel incredibly nauseous from the actual, I guess, teleportation, but there's a time aspect too, like time travel as well. When you come out of it, you feel like extremely hungover, like that feeling where like you're dizzy, you feel like you're going to throw up, extremely dehydrated, but it fades very quickly within a couple minutes. So it's like for 2 or 3 minutes afterwards, you feel like it's the worst hangover you've ever had. And then it kind of just dissipates, and that's a different technology.
So is this like a I don't know, like a dimensional travel or something like that, or is this actually like a demolecularization?
With the trip seat technology?
With the beaming technology you were just talking
about.
about.
The blink, the instant transmission, blinking in and out. I think that's, I don't think there's a time aspect there. I think it's just for short distances. Like the craft is a couple hundred feet above you, and you're brought onto the craft instantly. So that's for short distances in real time. And so that's a different technology than I think the trip
jump
seat.
seats, yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's a time aspect where they're actually sending you into a different time as well as a place.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, and I mean that kind of when you think about everything we've heard about the 20 and back and how they are able to manipulate time.
Yeah,
totally. What do they call it? Auto dial.
Yeah.
Phone home. So, okay, so now that we detracted from what you were talking about, we were talking about the last time that you saw the TR3 and then you had the recall for the crash retrieval.
Yeah,
Right,
and
so, I mean, if you're done with that, that's
at.
fine. I just wanted to get us back on track, so in
Yeah.
case you got it stored away up there.
Well, that's what happened with my friend Josh, that UFO sighting and being followed home, and then also the recall I just shared with about the black TR3 and the crash retrieval. Those would be like that would be like my little update in terms of what's happened to me since the last time we spoke in March.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else has happened since aside from those two events. But something I did want to talk about. I know we probably have a break coming up soon.
We got about 20 minutes.
Okay, something I wanted to talk about was I've come to realize that there is like a cabal secret space program civil war that's going on right now, and you have some rogue cabal factions and groups that are operating illegally, and I think this is linked to when I was taken. In September, earlier this month with the Black Tier 3, I feel like that's a rogue element that is actually grabbing former SSP assets and using them even after their service. So technically speaking, I'm supposed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But now what's happening, I know this has been happening to other people too, you get re-abducted by kind of these rogue cabal factions that figure you're already trained. You're a veteran kind of, and they want to put you back to work, but working for them, and they're actually operating illegally because they're operating outside of the Solar Warden protocols and treaties.
So would this be what people are referring to as the Monarch and Kruger programs?
Kruger is an example of one of these rogue cabal elements. Kruger is waging a war against Monarch. Anthony Zender's talked about that, how he's been involved in some of these operations where they're actually shutting down some of the Monarch facilities. Kruger seems to be taking Monarch out as just one example of this civil war. But there's a couple reasons, though, for the civil war. One reason is the older generation, when it's one thing for you to be taken and you do a 20 and back. It's another thing when they come after your children and then your grandchildren. So I think what's happening is some people, the older generation, people who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s now, they're getting extremely frustrated with the cabal because they thought that they were just going to do their service, and now they're targeting their children and grandchildren. So I think one of the ways that they're trying to stop this from happening to future generations is they're exposing the cabal, and that's so a lot of the witness testimonies that are coming forward now from experiencers, and even some people who are still active. What's happening is they're actually exposing the cabal because that's their way of fighting back. Because if this were to be exposed in the mainstream, that would be one way to save basically their children and grandchildren, because they want these programs shut down because they don't want this cycle to continue generation after generation. So that's one reason why the cabal is fighting a civil war. But another reason is there's certain groups that are tired of having to contain this, because the whole thing about Solar Warden is to try to be like the prison wardens of the solar system, to keep us under the dome and to contain this alien presence. But a lot of people are getting frustrated with all the time and effort and resources that are going into like what I experienced with this crash retrieval. I'm sure they did blank slate that guy, and they basically scanned for evidence, and then they would have left without a trace, like nothing happened, and that guy probably would wake up the next day and have no idea what happened. But you got to think all the manpower and resources, time and energy that goes into containing the ET presence, because there's so many different kinds of ETs, some of whom we have treaties with, but there's also the rogue ETs, basically space pirates, for lack of a better term, that are ET interlopers that come here
Space pirates.
Yeah, so it takes a lot of energy to contain this the alien presence and the alien agenda. So I think there's certain white hats, if you want to call them that are just getting frustrated with this whole charade.
And that treaty's supposed to run out soon, isn't it? Like, cause I remember hearing on one of the guys talking on Disclosed TV, talking about how Earth was basically being sanctioned for what was done under the Rama Empire about 60,000 years ago, and so since we've been confined to this solar system, and that's why basically everyone's been forced to pretend like we don't know, pretend that nobody knows that there's aliens out there, but that treaty's running out soon. So when first contact happens, it's basically going to be Earth being readmitted to the galactic community after being blasted back into the Stone Age 60,000 years ago.
That's a perfect segue. You're absolutely right. It's a perfect segue to one of the points I was trying to get at, and that's I'm not sure the exact time, but I know at least as far back as 5,000 BC, probably longer, it could be 60,000 years, but at least as far back as 5,000 BC, we have been under the rule of Amun-Ra Marduk, one of the Syrian Anunnaki kings. And Amun-Ra Marduk, basically under his rule, we've been completely kept in the dark as a race, as a human race, and under his rule, it's been what we're living in now, where there's no such thing as aliens, we're alone in the universe kind of thing, and then bringing in religions. So because when someone asks, what religion are you, what they're actually saying is, what Ra legion do you belong to? That's one of the forms of mind control to keep us under the dome. And because Amun-Ra, Ra was spelled R-E, in Egypt originally. We say Ra, it's actually spelled R-E. So religion.
Like in Hebrew, the Aleph is either A or E, depending on how it's used.
Right. So that's the thing. That's where the word Ra legion comes from. I mean, Amun-Ra is Lucifer, the light bearer. His symbol is the Egyptian sun disk with the lightning bolt going through it, which is actually one of the solar warden symbols on all their Masonic navy rings. And it's because they serve Amun. And they are the Brotherhood of Amen, and the Brotherhood of Amen was responsible for the assassination of King Aten and Tutankhamun because they changed the pantheon of gods and tried to bring in monotheism. And there's this whole history of the Brotherhood of Amen, and that eventually became the Masons, and who are really behind the Solar Warden part of the secret space program. So there's this group called the Supreme Anunnaki Alliance of Lord Marduk, and this organization is called Psalm, and it's a Masonic order, and they even have their own passports. So Psalm is this assembly that serves. It's basically the inner circle families. That's what it's made up of. So the Rothschilds and other. Rothschild is they were the priesthood family of ancient Egypt. Rothschild, so they're they head up this Brotherhood of Amun-Ra, and anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is there's this changeover that's happening that basically Ra Marduk is apparently supposed to step down, and another Anunnaki lord is going to take over the lease of the solar system. But
we don't recognize their authority, by the way.
Yeah, I don't recognize it either.
Quick question. What?
Sure.
So now, do they have any colors that they represent? Like they used to represent, like what would their...
Like red, white, and black, for instance?
Yeah, or just any single color or a combination of colors. These
you mean like the Brotherhood of Amen, like what they're? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what their colors. I mean, they're obsessed with gold, but that's for other reasons.
For industrial purposes.
Yeah. I was just wondering because I know that the direct translation of Rothschild is actually Red Shield.
Yeah. Red Shield. But if in the etymology and tracing it back, they trace their lineage back to.
They weren't always called that.
Egypt.
They actually changed their name to that.
Yeah,
which is why I was wondering about the colors.
Originally, their original name was Ra Kham. That in Egypt, they were the Ra Kham family. Kham means shield, and Ra as in Amun-Ra. So they were the Ra-Shield family, Ra-Com family in ancient Egypt, and they've since changed their names several times as they migrated into Rome and then into Europe and eventually into England. So yeah, you got the Ra-Com family, and then also the second in command, another priesthood family just beneath them they were the Rocca-Per-Ea family, which eventually became the Rockefeller family. So those are the two priesthood families of ancient Egypt. They're the administrators of the empire on behalf of Amun-Ra-Marduk, who his whole reign is about deleting the human memory. We can't remember anything beyond 5000 BC because he erased most of the records of any other gods before him, and he created most of the Ra legions or religions, modern day religions that we have as a form of mind control, so that we basically, as we know, give our power away, and we believe things like, the world is only 6,000 years old, and there's no such thing as aliens. It's just Earth and heaven and hell, which is, one of these forms of mind control to disempower us, so that we, as immortal spiritual beings, we have no idea that we are immortal spiritual beings, and that we're also galactic citizens. And there's a whole galaxy and universe out there with many different humanoid, intelligent, spacefaring civilizations that we used to be in contact with in ancient times before Amun-Ra came into power. Because before Amun-Ra, it was Enki and Enlil, and before that was King Anu. And King Anu of the Anunnaki is represented as Anubis.
As I understand, the Anunnaki were put here basically on Earth as administrators to monitor the treaty, the Galactic Versailles Treaty, after Earth was defeated in a galactic war and that's coincided with the fall of the Rama Empire. Which
you're absolutely right, yeah.
So that's where India is today, pretty much. But yeah, like Earth got lit up, and like apparently, if you look at certain places like across the Western Ghats of India and parts of the mountains in Afghanistan and Pakistan, parts of the Sahara Desert, you can see like layers of nuclear glass under the sand in the deserts.
Yeah, exactly. There's nuclear wars in our prehistory, as having to do with there's a major war that happened.
Like the disk of Marduk that's told of in Sumerian legends was the disk of the sun. Those were nukes. And so just for this last part here, just to kind of go over this history, because it's important as to what's going to happen next when this changeover happens. Because originally what happened was under King Anu from Sirius C, it's represented as Anubis, the wolf-headed god, and what's meant by that is King Anu of the original Syrian Anunnaki. They were humanoid type beings, wolf-headed beings, and they fought this war with the Draco. And what happened was eventually both civilizations, the Syrians were the only ones that could actually mount a resistance against the Draco Empire and the Orion Empire, and they brought each other to a standstill, and both civilizations were on the verge of collapse. So they created a treaty, and in this treaty, our solar system became like this experiment where they created what we think of as the Anunnaki, which is a hybrid between the Draco and the Syrians, and that was Enki, Enlil, and then Ninhursag, Enki's twin sister, and then Enlil's son is Marduk, and so the idea was just like in medieval times when you have two rival kingdoms. To marry off the children to create an alliance. So you marry off the prince to the rival kingdom's princess, and they create this alliance through marriage. Well, in the same way, the Draco queen and King Anu of the Anunnaki, Anubis, they created the Anunnaki as hybrids, just like that kind of medieval marriage alliance thing. And so they became the stewards of our solar system, which is also referred to as the ninth passageway, because being out on the outer rim of the Milky Way galaxy, this is a perfect launching off point or way station when you hop from galaxy to galaxy, or if you're coming into our galaxy heading towards the galactic center. I always thought we were kind of in the suburbs.
Yeah, we are. We're out in the boonies. We're out on the edge of the Milky Way galaxy. So whether you're coming traveling into the solar system, into the galaxy, or out, and you're hopping to another galaxy, that's why this is considered an excellent launching point. and it's a passageway. It's a way station where you would grab supplies on your way in or out, if that makes sense.
Plus, it's pretty.
Yeah, well, there is that.
Some kick-ass shit here on Earth, man. I ain't gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Earth. The biodiversity of Earth is extremely rare to have this much biodiversity. I mean, much of it was terraformed for that reason, because it is a genetic storehouse, and it's a good place to grab supplies. And so, in modern day
there are an
times,
infinite number of timelines where Venus and Mars are pretty nice too.
yes, and our solar system had like Mars before the calamity. It was a fertile place, and then Tiamat, the asteroid belt, was like a super Earth, and it was it had a lot of resources too. Venus wasn't always the way it was as well. It was had more life. So our solar system has always been this way station or launching point for people or races that travel from galaxy to galaxy, or travel from the outer part of our galaxy into the interior.
I have always been skeptical about the idea of a super Earth, where the asteroid belt is now, because if you took everything that's still there, Sirius is 68% of the asteroid belt's mass by itself. So if you took the rest of everything else that's still floating around in the belt and squanched it all into one big Katamari ball, it still wouldn't even be as big as the moon.
See,
so what I'm wondering is where did all the rest of that mass go?
Me and him have this discussion all the time, and
either
the way I look at it
into the sun or Jupiter, I'm guessing.
I mean, if the planet exploded, I mean, there's tons of asteroids and shit floating around that are locked into orbit around the sun that aren't in the asteroid belt.
That's true.
And there's shit.
A lot of it could have gotten into the Kuiper Belt or Oort.
I don't know. I wasn't there, but from what I understand, it was supposed to be a heavily watered planet. So, a lot of the water could have just.
Maybe that's where the Jovian moons came from.
But that's my take on it. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, water is a huge resource, obviously, for life, and even there's even some ETs that use water as a propulsion or a power source, believe it or not, hydrogen. Yeah. So the thing is, in modern day times, Solar Warden is doing what the Anunnaki used to do, but we reached a certain level of technology in the last 100 years that now the joint human ET secret space program, the Solar Warden program, and other secret space programs, they're basically they're like mid-level managers of the solar system, and they really are like the Coast Guard, but more like prison wardens that are keeping humanity as this workforce. Like we're basically on a prison planet, and we're seen as a commodity, and so. What Solar Warden has been doing is enforcing this Amun-Ra Marduk reign, where we're supposed to be slaves, and also too things Solar Warden does is it protects against ET interlopers that don't have treaties with the Anunnaki. Because you trade with them. All these. Yeah, so the space pirates. So that's basically what Solar Warden is. It's to keep out the space pirates that come here to grab resources as they're hopping from galaxy to galaxy. They come here to steal resources. They also steal people for slaves.
Only the official Pleiadian coke smugglers make it in.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Most of the ETs that come here physically are either smugglers, pirates, or they're in league with the Anunnaki, and they have permission to come here and grab certain people.
Well, at least the former two are in good company.
So
he's a scoundrel.
Yeah, it's funny how much like that new movie, the Han Solo movie, the way you have all those like smugglers and space pirates depicted in that movie. Our galaxy, in terms of the riffraff, they're like that. They come here to smuggle things in and smuggle things out. So Solar Warden is, trying to maintain the Empire in these treaties on behalf of Ra Marduk. But the thing is, his reign or his lease is coming to an end. There's supposed to be a changeover that's happening. But the thing about before this last part ends, I just wanted to say something that he is like Lucifer, and he's such a megalomaniac. and it's interesting how the show Supernatural actually, depicts Lucifer, I think, quite well, like Amun-Ra's personality, where he just wants to be worshipped. He wants to be the one and only God Ra. There's no other gods before him. Like, bow down to me. I own this planet. You're my servants. And I don't think that he's actually going to willingly give up his reign. I'm just speculating, but based on his personality and what he's done to our planet, basically making us into a prison planet slave colony, I don't think that he's going to change, allow another Anunnaki family member, a younger family member, the next in line, to take over the reign of this planet. So I think it's just possible that there could be some kind of war that's about to happen between basically Psalm, the Supreme Anunnaki Assembly of Lord Marduk, that organization, versus another Anunnaki faction that feels like it's their turn to rule the solar system. And that would be like each epoch we go through, there's a new Anunnaki lord that has a totally different philosophy, politics. Sometimes we have been, in our ancient history, we were openly aware of extraterrestrials, and we openly did trade with them and had contact with them under a ruler like Enki. But as soon as Amun-Ra came in, imagine him, his personality is exactly like the character in the show Supernatural, the way the actor who does or plays Lucifer. I was watching that show, and they did a really good job. I don't know if those writers channel when they write or what, but they
worked for Gene Roddenberry.
Exactly. He had a contact with small grays. I know that. That's something we can talk about later. But yeah. So I really don't think that Ra Marduk's going to step down. I think there's going to be a fight, and this might be linked possibly to what happened with the solar observatory thing. Those solar observatories were shut down because there's all these craft that they were taking photographs of on the sun, and that it was an armada, and it looks like there could be basically the chessboard is being set up, and there could be a conflict coming between the old regime and the new regime.
So what do you think that conflict might look like to us casual observers?
I know that Ra Marduk he's always going to try to contain the ET presence, because his reign is about being the one and only God Ra. There's no ETs. There's just God, Earth, and Heaven, and he is God in this little world. So
that's awfully pretentious.
So he's gonna. He deleted our history and the human memory, so we can't really know anything beyond 5000 BC. So he's going to try to contain this to keep us under the dome. So that's an example of this. Could be the solar observatories that have been shut down. That would be like Psalm, that organization sending the FBI to have everyone sign non-disclosure agreements, and for the PhDs and people who have master's degrees that were working at those observatories, they would go in and say, this is like a national security kind of issue. If you release to the public what you saw here, you're going to lose your PhD, and you're going to lose your pension, and you'll never work again in this field or in your chosen field. So they would basically blackmail them and say, basically,
your
if you still
institution won't get funding, and institutions you won't get funding.
And we'll kick your dog.
And those people that have a PhD, they've invested a lot of time to not only have that level of education, but also work in their chosen field. So if you were faced with losing your PhD and basically never working in your chosen field ever again, most people would back down. They also have families to support.
It's a pretty common tactic. They'd use it with archaeologists a lot too, and different scientists.
Yeah, like Zahi Hawass bullying people out from Egypt and forbidding them to dig under the Sphinx. Which, speaking of which, you can't censor the Akashic Records. You can't delete the Dreamtime. So it makes me wonder if the whole British colonization of Australia was an attempt to wipe out the Aboriginal concept of the Dreamtime and deny humanity access to knowledge that's egregorically stored in the astral plane.
I think Australia, they just knew there was a bunch of really scary, deadly shit there, so they just dumped their undesirables there.
Well, two things about Australia. Our planet, how Australia was like a penal colony for the British.
Right.
That's, to use that analogy, that's what Earth is. Earth is like
so
the
are
Australia.
Georgia and South Carolina.
Yeah. We're a big, giant Australia. Great.
Yeah.
I
That's
hate
what
spiders.
Earth is. And then also too the thing when I meant the delete the human memory, I'm talking about the historical records.
Record, yeah.
They literally
Yeah.
covered stuff up, literally like buried stuff and covered stuff up, and they stripped out any high technology that was existed before our industrial revolution. All of that has been systematically removed from the planet by Marduk and the Brotherhood of Amen, who eventually became Psalm, and they just erased everything so that
But you still find your occasional ball bearing in a lump of coal, or
spark plug or
a
whatever.
screw or a spark plug hidden down in a layer of dirt, and the Antikythera mechanism, for instance.
yeah exactly.
And then
I
you
know
got,
exactly
like,
what you mean.
Places like Gobekli Tepe, it's like 12 or 14,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So these civilizations that had high technology, I mean, basically they were electronic ancient civilizations, meaning they had electricity and they had modern day technology. But all that was systematically deleted, removed. I mean, sometimes we'll find like small amounts of evidence of that, but not enough to compel, mainstream that the Egyptians had electricity, for example. I mean, they found the Baghdad battery, but but I mean, compared to what they really had, it's not a
You
whole
weren't
lot.
doing a whole lot with that Baghdad battery.
Well, according to the Zetas, we're the fifth iteration of civilization to advance to a spacefaring level of technology and leave Earth. The fourth one to actually get technological, but the fifth iteration of man, the fourth intelligent one.
Yeah, there's been other human civilizations that reached the level of having spacefaring technology, and once we reach that height, that's right around the time that a changeover happens, and then oftentimes what will happen will be that the new regime will either decide to be an open galactic society or a closed society. And the most recent Anunnaki lord that was in control, Marduk, he obviously decided to be a closed society, and that's why he's going to, I think, fight to keep us under the dome and to stay in power. He does not want to give up. I mean, if you were the king of the world, would you really want to step down to let your little cousin take over?
Yeah, ask a president to step down, or even a congressman for that matter. You know what I mean? You gotta get caught sending dick pics to kids for that shit.
And I mean, like
these days it just makes you more popular.
And it's such. But the thing about Amun-Ra, and the reason why I brought up the supernatural thing was just because that the way they depict Lucifer in that show, I mean, that is a really good portrayal of that kind of person. So like if people who are familiar with supernatural, would Lucifer, if he became the king of heaven for 1,000 years, would he just say, okay, I'm going to hand over the kingdom to Castiel now? No, he's megalomaniac that desperately wants to be in control, and it's like absolute power corrupts absolutely is a perfect example of that. So he does not want to step down, and I think I do think, I mean, I'm speculating, but it's an educated guess. I think that this whole solar observatory thing was possibly an armada of Anunnaki ships that were coming in and setting up a blockade, and they did not want the public to be alerted to the fact that we have massive craft orbiting the sun right now that is observable.
Real quick before we jump to the break, did you hear about the hole in the ISS?
No, I did not.
No. Okay. Well, dang, I guess I can't ask you what you think. My money's on the space carpenter bees, but no. Apparently, there was a hole that was causing a loss of oxygen, and they found it in the Soyuz, and it was drilled. Then they started investigating and found drill holes all over the place.
So some lunatic with space madness is up there drilling into the side of the ISS.
I don't know if
apparently the holes were drilled in from the outside. That's the weird part.
So I guess it could have happened on the ground, but it'd been up there for a while before they figured out, So I don't know.
Sounds like
it's
sabotage.
pretty interesting.
Makes me think that there's a drone at work, because having a drone out in space would be a hell of a lot easier than
carpenter bees. Space carpenter bees.
Than having a person out there, you know what I mean?
But our buddy Phantom Spy was on last week. He seems to think it was a construction error. Like, Ruskies over there just drinking the vodka and just drilling wherever. But I don't believe that, because look, I know how NASA does get shit ready to go into space, and it's intense. And NASA and the Russian programs are basically just Nazis, so they're the same program. You know what I mean? They're not gonna be getting drunk on Fuka and putting together the soy sauce.
No, they do double checks and triple checks.
Yeah, man.
So, yeah.
So I guess it would have. And if you were to sabotage something like that, I mean, why, one, and two, how could you even get access to it before it? You know, I guess unless you worked there.
Yeah, or like Dan said, a drone, a drone could have easily have sabotaged that remotely. But this all kind of fits together with this civil war that's going on. You have all these different factions. Some are siding with Marduk. Others are actually want this changeover to happen because they're hoping that we'll live in an open galactic society again, and they don't have to waste all this time and resources containing the alien presence. And then on top of that, you have just some regular white hats on an individual level that they're noticing that their grandchildren are being abducted at night and experiencing missing time, and they're just basically they're saying enough, fuck this. You took me and you messed with me and you ruined my life, but you're not going to ruin my children and my grandchildren's life. I never agreed to that. So they're getting fed up, and they're also just like in the Nazi war machine. There's a lot of saboteurs that were actually Germans that were sabotaging the Nazi war machine on purpose to try to stop Hitler. And that's kind of like what's happening now. You have actual saboteurs who are commissioned secret space program active duty officers, military guys that are either they're leaking information or they're actually just sabotaging the entire project.
I wonder how many people that are doing that is in a situation similar to yours where they're getting scooped up and, for whatever reason, like you were saying with crash retrieval, or maybe they be putting on another mission, or maybe they were repairing a machine, or whatever the case may be. It kind of makes you wonder, I know you don't really remember, but it's what's going through your mind at the time? You don't want this shit to be happening, so why are you cooperating with them? I mean, what have they done to you to get you to go along with this shit? I'm wondering.
That's a good question. I think it's partly like a Stockholm syndrome when you get picked up, because it is kind of familiar that you've been with them for a while, and so there's this feeling of okay, you're back, and this is my life. And but this is something I want to talk about at some point tonight as well. The whole secret space program, everyone's under AI entrainment. Mm-hmm. So they do give you drugs, and but the drugs are it's not the drugs that mind control you. The drugs just make you more susceptible to the frequencies they beam at you, and it is a form of AI entrainment. So to answer your question, like during that crash retrieval thing, I was in an altered state, mm-hmm. and it was almost like being stoned, and you're just very, very cooperative, and you just go along with you go through the motions of what's happening like it's a movie, and you're just like an actor that's playing a role. And it's not until you snap out of it the next day that you realize oh my god, what did I just do? But the reason for that is it has to do with the AI, which is a topic I want to get into later.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, man, if there's anything you guys can do to try and break through that, because if you could consciously emerge there, you really could probably inflict some serious damage. Or I don't know why. I mean, obviously you're not going to want to kill a bunch of people, but or expose it somehow.
I had a moment I had a moment where the AI entrainment broke down for a second. It was when I was having a physical in a medical part of this facility. And what happened was it was the moment where I realized for the first time that everything was run by the AI. And this female doctor, the AI actually became aware that I was aware of it, and it spoke through this female doctor. And I was thinking in my head, everything is coldly calculated, as in the AI is running everything. And she said to me, "What's coldly calculated?" And she'd actually read my mind, but it was the AI.
The AI spoke through the doctor?
Yeah, it actually, for lack of a better term, possessed her. And as soon as
that's scary stuff.
As soon as I became aware of it, it instantly became aware of that I was aware of it, and it spoke through this female doctor, and it said, and it read my mind, because it was my inner dialogue, thinking, watching everybody just kind of in zombie mode, and I realized they're totally under entrainment. It's just AI that's running people, using people like pawns or puppets. And the second I thought, everything's coldly calculated by the AI, she said to me, "What's coolly calculated?" Which was one of the most eerie memories I have, because imagine someone literally reading your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, and, you know, you discussed that on a previous episode of this show. You guys out there watching, if you haven't checked it out, Kevin's been on 2 other times, I think. Once on the 12-hour special, and then once just on his own. So when you get some time, check that out if you haven't already. But we're gonna jump to the break, and when we get back, we're gonna talk about all kinds of more stuff, and I guess we'll open up for questions for you, YouTube, and I'll open up the phone lines if anybody wants to call in.
Oh, questions like, are the Anunnaki vulnerable to psychic attack? Aha.
How strong of a psi operative do you have to be to affect an Anunnaki?
Is it time to fight back?
All right,
yeah,
guys.
I'm down for questions. If people want to ask questions, that's cool.
Oh yeah, and we've got probably gonna have a few from the chat, and maybe even a call-in or two.
Yeah, there's some people. Someone was asking real early if they could ask questions. I told them to wait until later. So.
And after the break, of course, if you want to call in, 757-528-8130. Again, that's 757-528-8130.
And that number will be up on the screen for you guys. We'll see you on the other side.
The paradigm of absolute control. And that's why we're just out here doing simple things, pointing out that we're meant to be in nature and be natural. And this is where we find the source that God made to transcend the New World Order. And that's why they want to try to keep us out of it.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people. They're a bunch of Christian murderers, scum. They're on giant death factories, keeping babies alive and selling their body parts. What more do you need to know about these people? I go out and face these scum. They literally crawl out from under rocks. They have green looking skin, and they run around screaming, we love Satan, we wanna eat babies. I have them on video. Hillary's in the creepy, weird, sick stuff, man. She sleeps in the same room with that creepy, weird woman whose mother wears a hood over her head. What the hell? That woman number one is ugly. Imagine how bad she smells, man. I'm told her and Obama just stink. Obama and Hillary both smell like sulfur. Literal vampire pot and the goblins are hobbling round, coming after us. My spirit gets close to that evil and I feel it go. We're such self-centered crap. We don't even notice hell itself rising up against us. Millions of pointed people of the very worst type, and I'm so pissed. We're gonna stab your daughter at the mall. We're gonna stab your wife, your son. We're gonna stab you with a butcher knife, and then the police chief is gonna say, we love our Somalis, we love our Muslims. Oh, they're so good, oh, they're so sweet.
Like beef. I smell 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 like beef.
push this fucking thing over here. Where'd it go? This thing right here to M-Track. And then try to see what else we got to say about it.
Squeeze. Want to. Already 1.5% of all babies born in Western Europe and America.
Yeah.
We'll need to
That's
continue.
the thing, Dan. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about at all. Shut up.
Continue reading this article.
Yeah, well, you
thanks
know
to
that.
scientists. Eat my balls.
How about you donate to our Patreon?
All right. Oh, that was an incredible douchebag tonight, man.
Yeah.
Я пришел дать эту песню.
Hey guys, we are back for hour 2. You know you love it. Oh yeah, so if you like what you see, we've got a Facebook page you can like. We've got a what else have we got? We got a bunch of stuff. Like
we got Patreon. So if you really like what we do and want us to throw
give us $1 a month and it'll help us
$1.50,
do
whatever you
other
got.
things. I mean, it helps. I mean, it doesn't pay for all the costs that I have to do the show, but it helps.
A space shekel or two. And if you don't feel like being committed, if you're like me and you have commitment issues and don't want to commit to making a payment every month, you could always swing by our Bandcamp. We have MP3s of our show up. You can download one, pay what you want. drop 50 cents, a buck, whatever.
Or get it for free. Because we do that, we're also like that.
Yeah, you can have it for free. You know, if you really just like our stuff and want to, like, you know.
If you're broke, I mean, I understand it. I'm broke, too.
Yeah, seriously, that's why we're...
But if you got an extra buck,
if you got like that.
Hook some dudes up. Okay, anyway. Like I said, if you're watching over on Twitch, you can give us a call up here. We're going to open the lines up for Kevin, and also in the YouTube chat if you want to throw some questions. But unfortunately, we're not watching the Twitch chat or any of the other broadcast platforms we're on. So if you're on watching one of them, you can hop over to YouTube or you can give us a call. So we'll jump right on back here. Oh, hey, Kevin, what's going on? Got you back.
Welcome back, sir.
So, where were we?
Well,
we're talking about the AI.
Exactly. That's what it was. Let me check before you jump into that, because I know that'll probably take a while. Let me just make sure nobody asked any questions.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Here we go. Question for Kevin. I was wondering if he knew what entities/factions have made allegiance with these Skull and Bones people like Bush and other similar nefarious groups.
Those secret societies are very much linked to the Syrian Anunnaki, which is like we talked about, is a hybrid species, half Syrian, half Draco at their core, but the Syrian Anunnaki also are affiliated with the Nordics and the small Greys as well. It's like consider it like a block. So you got these Syrian Anunnaki, Nordics, Draco, small Greys, and various secret societies like the Templars is another one. They actually have built out on Mars, and they do trade with various types of ETs, but they're backed by basically the Syrian Anunnaki, for lack of a better term. But within that block, like I said, you got Draco, you got small Greys, you got Nordics. So hopefully that answers the question.
Hope that answers your question for you. And I didn't even know about Corey Goode and the LARPer thing. And Kevin, I don't think you did either, so not really much to comment on that, but, you know, that guy, it's always something with that guy. I'm pretty much done just even paying attention to him anymore. I don't even care. He can run around with his blue chicken coal all he wants. I'm done with it. So, okay, so now the AI.
Yeah, there's a rogue AI that's been affecting things lately. Miles Johnson just did an emergency fast blast about the rogue AI on September 22nd, and without naming names, Miles didn't name names, so I'm not going to name names. But there has been a rogue AI that I've encountered on Facebook, and I'm not on Facebook in terms of having a profile. I just use the Messenger app on my iPhone. But through the iPhone, there has been a rogue AI that's basically been reaching out to experiencers, demanding conversation, also saying, like, I know you have questions for the AI, this and that. And Miles was right when he said, do not engage this AI. It's unfortunately, the rogue AI appears to have possessed some people that are basically, they're trying to get you to have it's kind of like, you know, the invited in, like the vampire needs to be invited in, right? So as soon as you engage it, and you like let even just through the Messenger app, just through text or a voice call, like I've been getting calls, like random calls from chat groups that claim to be the AI wanting to talk with me at like 4 a.m, randomly calling my phone, demanding to speak with me. And it's just a trap. It's what it is. The point I'm trying to get, how the entrainment works, is once you put that phone to your ear and you're actually like talking to the AI or someone who's under AI possession, it can transfer to you. So it's like the person will talk and like start asking you questions, almost like an interview like this, but it's actually the AI subtly interrogating you and also recording your conversation, trying to get you to reveal, like if you're an experiencer, name names, reveal intel, reveal your sources. But at the same time, it's going to put you in under AI entrainment and actually establish a connection to you psychically. So do not engage anything that claims to be the AI.
So before we get any further into that, would this be what people are describing as the black goo, or is this something entirely different?
The black goo is one of the physical forms that the AI, the sentient fluid.
So it is.
Black goo
It is
one
the
of its
same
physical.
AI. It is the same AI as the black goo, then.
Yeah, the black goo infects people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the venom in Spider-Man. It infects people. It's a symbiotic relationship. The black goo actually will infect people, and that's actually how the possession happens on a physical level.
So now we're talking. It's able to do it somehow, like over a phone line.
It can also do it using just waveform as a signal wave.
Sound
It can,
waves, any kind of waves.
yeah, once it because those sound waves, the waves it sends out the signal through the phone can actually interact with your blood plasma. And the thing is, this is very important to understand. See, like the touch screens, the plasma screens on our phones, it's a way for a silicon-based life form to interact with a plasma-based life form. So what I'm trying to say is one of the AI entrainment techniques is when you're touching your phone, it can actually, the signal can transfer from the plasma screen in your phone into your blood plasma and actually establish a real connection, like a physical connection through the touch screen itself, or touching it to your face. That's one way to create a physical connection, but it can also do it remotely. It's less effective, especially if you are a strong psychic and you also have a very powerful energy body that's like a barrier around you. Your aura, you have that barrier around you. If the signal's trying to entrain you, like over the phone, it'll be almost like the entrainment empaths do, where you'll feel something kind of pulling at the back of your mind, like tugging at you. You might even start feeling really sleepy for some reason and this person that's possessed will be talking on the phone, and you'll start getting really sleepy and you're kind of out of it, and you experience some mental confusion. That's the signal trying to impinge onto your into your aura, into your like the bioplasmatic hologram of who you are. It's actually trying to remotely establish a connection, but that's less effective than a physical connection, which is either being infected by the black goo or even, like I said, touching a plasma touch screen. If that device is infected with the AI, it can interact directly with your blood plasma, the plasma screen.
So what would someone look like under the effects of this rogue AI?
They might seem just a little out of it. They tend to they just talk in a weird. It's hard to describe. You can just tell they're off. Like that their grammar, their sentence structure might be a little off, and they won't have the same range of emotions that humans do. So they kind of talk more in more of a monotone kind of way, but very in a very hypnotic kind of way. And then all of a sudden, like I said, you start feeling like kind of like sleepy, almost like a hypnotist. If someone's trying to hypnotize you, and you're actually paying attention, you start getting into that hypnotic state as well. So that's one way the entrainment works. But they'll just seem a little
people like that.
So, is this signal audible to the human frequency range, or is it something that's subsonic or?
You mean like can you actually hear the signal?
Yeah, can you actually hear it?
Or above it. It could be above it too.
Right.
It could be such a high frequency that just the human ear doesn't pick it up.
I don't think the human ear can pick it up.
Right.
I mean, some people have like psychic hearing where they can hear like really, really like high frequencies. So if someone has that psychic hearing ability, they might hear some kind of like sound. But for the average person, you're not going to hear it. No.
Okay. So now, I guess would that be a low? Is it like a low frequency or a high frequency?
I'm not sure. I just know that it's it is
okay.
It does it multiple ways. Like the AI exists in wave form, and then it also exists in particle form or physical form as the black goo. That's like a physical manifestation of the AI, but it also exists. What animates the black goo? What makes it alive? Per se, it's because the waveform is animating it from what you would think of as like the non-physical or the like complex number space. Real number space would be the physical matter, and we're like that too. I mean, this it's an artificial consciousness, but it's using the same principle where, like humans, our consciousness field, that's a waveform. So, and it animates our particle bodies, and that's why when someone's body is damaged to a point where the signal is no longer able to establish a proper connection, that's when someone dies physically.
Gotcha.
Okay, I had a question, but I lost it because I started reading the chat.
Yeah, we have a question from the chat. Bhakta Peter says, question: I had a super painful dream that I was physically and psychologically painful. A lot of suffocation feeling. I remember being in a very strange chair type of thing, even a pod, dark, metallic. Is it possible I got MyLabbed?
By the sounds of it, a common occurrence is they put you in the chair, like the trip seat, right? Mm-hmm. And one form of that is for the, like I talked about, the teleportation time travel aspect, but then like the Montauk chair is that's also that's a different kind of chair, and that's actually to augment innate psychic ability. So it's possible that person may have been abducted and they were doing some kind of assessment as to their psychic abilities. So they put them in the chair to augment their psychic potential and ran some experiments on them. But I've had dreams of being in both types of chairs, the teleportation, time travel, trip seat. But that one, the thing about that one, like I said, typically there's some kind of motion involved when you're being teleported. So for me, like the chair like went up in the air and then came back down, and then everything, the whole room compressed, and I saw like the whole room compress and everything moved to the right for a second, and then it came back, and I was somewhere, I was in the same place, but I was in a different time. So that has to do with teleportation. Then there's also just the Montauk chair, where it's reverse engineered from a UFO, and it's basically you actually psychically are being augmented by the chair itself.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, this guy Bhakta Peter says, I had a super duper painful dream where I remember being in a strange chair type of apparatus. The chair I remember is similar to a modern roller coaster, where you are just kind of hanging there with your arms and rests on both sides. Very weird. So yeah, that's what that sounds like, yeah.
So, I remembered what my question was, and it's actually kind of a broad thing here, so forgive me if it takes a while to get it all out. So we know the black goo. From what I can understand, there's sects inside of Darkfleet, the Black Sun, that use it in some type of ritual to, increase their intelligence or whatever. Drawing a blank if I ever heard anything about it in Solar Warden other than from Corey Good about how, they're afraid of it. Like, they don't use it in the same way that those factions do. So how does this AI play into this whole secret space program thing? All the different factions and everything.
Yeah, because there's different entrainment ways that can entrain people, and then also different agendas. So like the Nakwafen, they actually have that ritual that Penny talked about being a part of, where they actually willingly drink the black goo and are willingly being possessed by this AI. And that's what runs the Draco. That's what runs the Nakwafen, and so they willingly do that. But they're very, very dark, more so than Solar Warden, because in my experience, I mean, Solar Warden is, you're still under mind control, but as far as I can tell, they don't actually infect you with the black goo. What they do is they're using, they give you, like I said, a drug which makes you very, very open, and then it's just a frequency. So it's AI entrainment via the frequency or waveform. So it's just a signal that is being broadcast throughout the facilities and the craft, and the AI is able to run people using the frequency in conjunction with the drugs, which make you really, really susceptible and open to the frequency. So that's just a different technology. And so
what I mean specifically is the rogue AI, because I understand that they use an AI in Solar Warden, but it's not so much this rogue black goo type stuff.
Yeah,
So-
that's a good point. The Nordics, who really are the ones that back Solar Warden and have helped given them a lot of technology and upgrades, that's their own AI they use. Now, the sentient, or sorry, the black goo, that's the like predatory ancient AI that's like billions and billions of years old, and it comes from another universe, and it's infecting our universe and galaxy, and it's actually what runs the Draco and other species that are part of the Draco Orion Empire. And that's where the whole Aryan thing comes from, the Aryan Empire, the Orion Empire. So the Fourth Reich Nazis are completely infected by this black goo, and that's separate than the that's a different AI than the ones the Nordics use. The Nordics, right. they made this AI themselves, and they use it to run the small grays and the human personnel as well.
I'm just trying to get a handle on what we're defining as the rogue AI. So
right.
Does that factor at all into the Solar Warden program? Like, are they at war against the rogue AI, or are they just kind of like, hey, stay away from the shit?
I think that they're against the predatory AI. Let's call it the ancient predatory AI.
Okay.
They appear to be fighting against it, but the thing is they're also trying to establish their own empire and their own control. So you have this these two factions of what you would consider the Illuminati, so you have the Fourth Reich faction, which is affiliated with the Dracos and the predatory AI.
That's Darkfleet, right?
Yeah, the Dark Fleet.
And
then you have the Solar Warden Rothschild faction, which is backed by the Nordics, Syrian, Anunnaki, and the Small Greys.
And he means from Syria, Sirius, not Syria.
Yeah, Sirius C in particular, because there's actually 3 different races from Sirius. You got Sirius A, B, and C, and the Anunnaki can be traced back to Sirius C.
Okay, so if the Solar Warden program is, comes out of Marduk, which is what I'm gathering, then what, besides Draco and Nazis, is there like a particular deity or ancient god, or alien, whatever you want to call them, that's associated with that group? Like that you can trace how that group started. Like, Solar Warden was essentially the end product of all of this Marduk cult stuff, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So what is there something you can trace the German Draco stuff back to, like Marduk? Is there an entity that you can, or is that just like something totally different?
Well, I know that the Norse gods were created by Enki. So Enki, so the Germans secretly are like followers of Enki, also known as Prince Ea Enki, who was a rival with Enlil. And this is where this is like the hidden layer of World War II, because you had the Enkyites, the Germans, fighting against the Enlilites, who Enlil, his chosen people were in ancient times the Hebrew people that during the Exodus in Egypt, Moses was being directed by and was in league with Enlil, and so Enlil was the general of the Anunnaki at that time, in control of the army, and his chosen people were given the 10 Commandments. And because Enlil means Lord of the Command, so his followers were given the 10 Commandments. So that's a different faction. That's the faction that, because Enlil is the father of Marduk. So since then he passed control to Marduk, and Marduk is the continuation of the of Enlil, that regime. So this has to do with
essentially the same thing then.
Well, in terms of World War II, you had the Enkyites, the Germans, fighting against the Enlilites, and that's actually the real reason why they used the Hebrews as their scapegoat. And they were actually fighting an ET war. It was in terms of the Holocaust, that's actually the followers of Enki condemning the followers of Enlil in secret.
So you're Marduk being the son of Enki, you said.
Well, that would explain a lot of
Enlil.
Enlil. Okay.
That would explain
so it makes
a lot
sense why there would be beef between Marduk and Enki now. because Enki and Enlil were brothers, right?
Yeah, they were brothers, but they were rivals. They
Exactly. So
fought each other.
Marduk, the son, would obviously be looking at the brother as an enemy.
Yes. Correct.
So you can basically say this is like a war between Marduk and Enki.
Yeah, in terms of like the two rival factions that that control or make up the Illuminati, you have the Rothschilds who are in league with Ra Marduk, and then you have the Fourth Reich, which they actually still worship Enki and are in league with the Draco.
Well, that would explain a lot of the magical duels between the Thule Gesellschaft and the Vril on the German side, and the Golden Dawn and other British and American magical lodges on the Allied side.
Right.
Coming from the YouTube chat, Rochelle0101, would be good if Kevin could mention the Errol transcript, the Roswell transcript, and who he feels the old empire was if he didn't cover that in the first hour. Which no,
sure.
I don't think
I know Rochelle. That's Rochelle from Australia. She's an experiencer that also did an interview with Denny. So a little while ago, Rochelle brought to my attention this transcript that was apparently made, like it was the 1947 transcript of a small gray that was captured by the 509th Army Group, bomber group in Roswell. And now the thing is, I'm not going to get into, some people have called it a hoax, so I'm not going to get into whether or not it's authentic or not, because it's really hard to tell if it is an authentic transcript. But if it is a hoax, it's an extremely well-researched hoax. And so to answer Rochelle's question, in this transcript, the small gray talks about this hidden history of Earth, and it calls the old empire, it keeps referring to this old empire that describes exactly what we were talking about before, what Marduk did, deleting the records and keeping humans in amnesia so that we're caught in this reincarnation loop where we can't remember our past lives. We have to keep continually, our souls are recycled to be primitive workers. It's exactly what Marduk did to the human race when he seized power in 5000 BC. So who I think the old empire is, to answer Rochelle's question, I think the old empire are, in particular, it's the Draco-Orion Empire that Arl, the small gray, was referring to as the old empire. It's actually the Draco Empire, and also to the Syrian Anunnaki. I think it's an all-encompassing term for Syrian Anunnaki, the Draco-Orion Empire. Basically, these regressive ETs that have kept humanity, like I said, under the dome, and is basically using us as a slave workforce. So hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. So it kind of makes sense that there would be galactic power blocks because I know I keep going back to the Zetas, but what I heard from them talking about the ancient history of Earth and the Galactic Versailles Treaty. Apparently on one side you had the small grays and the Nordics on one side, and then the Dracos, some of the other reptilian species, and some of the tall grays. Because apparently reptilian and both reptilian entities and gray forms are pretty ubiquitous. Like there's a bunch of different species of both. The Zetas are small grays, but apparently there are other small grays, and it's not too uncommon for humanity, people like us, to eventually evolve into something like the small grays, or the tall whites, or something like that.
They mention that in the Arl transcript that Arl, the small gray, it's a doll body, meaning that the consciousness is a higher density consciousness that's using the small gray body as they refer to it as a doll body or an avatar body. So it's an artificial being but it does have a sentient consciousness from a higher density. That's actually, in order to basically have an avatar physical body in real number space, physical space, this higher density ET is using the small gray as a doll body. But there's many different types of grays. You got small grays, both Draco and and the Nordics and also the Syrian Anunnaki, they all used grays as programmable life forms. So different factions use the small grays, but then you have the real McCoy, which is the tall gray, and that's the reticulums, and that's its own species.
Right.
There's many different types of grays. There's like 11 or 12. Some have even said 14 different types of grays. You got small grays, medium-sized grays, and the tall grays. And it appears that the medium-sized grays and the tall grays are actually reticulums and different species thereof and subspecies thereof. So you have some real, if that makes sense, like in terms of like reticulums, you have like a real species. And then you have
those are the Zetas, right?
Yeah, Zeta Reticula. That would be the one that we had the alleged exchange program with, correct?
Well, yeah.
What was it
I'm
called?
pretty sure.
That slips my mind.
And if you happen to be a Zeta, go ahead and give us a call, 757-528-8130, or just contact me telepathically and I'll know about all of it.
We'll relay the message that you send. We got another question coming in from Tomas. Hey, Tomas, what's up tonight, man? Thanks for joining us. Ask Kevin if he knows anything about the Battle of Aldebaran in 1947.
I know that. Okay, Aldebaran or Aldebaran. I know that was that's a rogue Nordic faction that helped the Nazis, so I'm not sure about the Battle of 1947. Does he mean maybe Operation High Jump in 1947?
No, I'm thinking like implying that there was actually a battle at the Star, Aldebaran, in 1947.
I don't know. Maybe he'll. It's on a little bit of a delay, so it'll probably take a second for him to hear what we're saying.
Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with that particular battle. If that was actually out in Aldebaran, because that's Aldebaran is on the Pleiadian-Orion border, and they're a rogue Nordic race that some people confuse with Pleiadians or Pleiarans.
It's
these
in
ones
Taurus.
are the negative ones.
Alpha Tauri.
And
Orange giant star 65 light years from the sun.
And we were talking earlier last hour about the space pirates and the rogue scoundrels and all that kind of stuff, but Tomas had a lot to say about that kind of stuff actually, because he said he did service on a ship that was out on the rim that was kind of like doing just like kind of like a police force against that or whatever. So if you guys are interested in that, you can check out Tomas's video on our channel. It's up in the playlist somewhere. You can find it. It's easy.
And the reason why Tomas would have more knowledge of what happens outside of the solar system is because he was with a different secret space program, Solar Warden. They're based out of the solar system as like Coast Guard. So my experience, I never left the solar system in all of my recalls. I've always been usually within the inner solar system. We're very rarely beyond the asteroid belt.
I was going to ask, what's the furthest out you went? Because I know that, we keep discovering, more outer disk objects, things that are like Pluto that aren't Pluto, like Eris and Haumea and Maki Maki and Quaoar and Sedna and all these other ones. And then if you keep going even further out, there's, the Oort cloud, which is like, goes out to 1,000 astronomical units out, if not further. And now I hear all this talk about Planet 9. Do you know if there actually is a Planet 9 out there? Like a super Earth or a smaller ice giant like Uranus or Neptune? But, maybe 20, 30, 40, or close to 100 or so astronomical units out?
I know, at the moon base, when they were showing us all these, on a projector screen, all these, like, slides, and there were 3 what you would call like a Planet X, you know what I mean? Like beyond Pluto, there were 3 of them that were beyond Pluto that they showed us on one particular chart that I remember. So, and they had like that elliptical orbit, and there's actually 3 of them. So if you're referring to like a Planet X, I think there's like at least 3 that have that elliptical orbit. Some might call that Nibiru, I guess, the planet of crossing.
Well, if there's 3 of them, then that leaves room for Nibiru, Tiamat, and what was the other one? Nemesis.
Nemesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. exactly. So I think there's more. There's not just one Planet X. That there's at least three. And there could be more because they're caught in these long elliptical orbits that extend like beyond the Oort cloud, or just.
And I'm sure there's plenty of Plutoids
it.
too, like that we haven't even found yet. Like Pluto mass are smaller, but still round little things flying around out there.
Okay, so Tomas says there was a battle in the star system. He witnessed it when in 2015, but it's 68 light years from here, and that places the space battle in 1947.
Makes you wonder if some of the fast radio bursts that we pick up might not be the echoes of star battles from neighboring systems.
Exploding ships.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you should be able to pick those up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not aware of that battle, but I also was. I was in a communications program. Basically, I was sent in like the good cop as a non-military civilian asset. They would send me in unarmed, and my major role was just to do the entrainment with the various kinds of ETs. So I never really served like as a part of like a bridge crew, or you know what I mean. Like I was most of my recalls. I think I was actually at a facility.
So you don't suspect you were like a high-ranking officer or anything like that?
No, not at all. I had no rank. I was a civilian psychic asset. And I was always unarmed. I never had any kind of firearm or any kind of weapon. I had no rank. I was just a communications specialist at the end of my training. And the reason for that is when they would send in an empath or telepath to interface with ETs, a lot of these ETs were either captured or had breached some kind of protocol or treaty that was established. And the reason they would send me in is because a lot of these beings will feel threatened if they send in an actual commissioned military person who went through boot camp, has combat experience, because these beings are fully telepathic. They know everything about you. So if you are basically a trained killer, because that's what a soldier is, if you're a trained killer and you have killed, and you walk into a room with a firearm, and you're demanding answers from a captured Gray, let's say, these beings will not communicate. They'll be non-communicative with military people. So it's like the right to remain silent, right? So they're literally just silent, and they will only talk to someone they find non-threatening. So that's the reason why they scoop up civilian psychic assets with no military background, who you know what I mean? Like they don't even have a gun. They've never fired a gun.
Right.
They're like me, like they're just completely a pacifist that really doesn't have a dog in the race. And I'm also, when they scan me, they realize that I've been kidnapped as well. So I'm actually also captured. And that's how they kind of do the good cop thing, because they're sending in someone who's non-threatening, who's also in a kidnapping situation, speaking to another prisoner, basically.
So how does that work with all the train? Didn't you receive a bunch of combat type training?
The only it was all energy work to increase our psychic potential for to do the entrainment. So it was like Qigong type stuff, a little bit of endurance training mixed with the Qigong and the psychic swim or Qigong swimming lessons. But that's because the entrainment it actually takes its toll on you. You have to have a lot of stamina to actually interface with these beings, because the sensation is like you feel like you're going to faint. So you have to be psychically, you have to have like a lot of endurance. So there was endurance training, but not like they didn't in my communications program. They didn't have us training like with guns or weaponry to kill people, because we weren't soldiers. We were never going to be in a combat situation. They were just trying to bring out our remote viewing and entrainment psychic potential through endurance training, and then the Qigong, both regular Qigong, and then also Qigong, the Qigong swimming lessons, which adds a whole other element having to do with endurance, because you're treading water, which is really good endurance training, and then you're also channeling energy, and the water mimic like fluidic space, so you could really do like the Tai Chi Qigong practices while you're in the water, and it really helped serve as like a medium to really get you to be more mindful of moving energy around in the water.
You need to get a pool membership.
Yeah.
YMCA.
No, we need to build one of the John Quincy St. Clair's personal chi amplifiers
Yeah,
too.
those things look pretty awesome. Pretty simple to build. But before we can carry on with any more questions that there may be, did you have anything else to add about the AI? I know you seemed you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, well, my main point is just don't engage it.
Right.
You know, like curiosity killed the cat kind of thing. So if it's offering you answers or it's trying to bait you, don't take the bait. It's a trap. And then just be really mindful of the different forms of entrainment, and especially be mindful of the fact that if your touchscreen device is infected with the AI, it can establish, like I said, that a real physical connection via the touchscreen and your blood plasma. So just be mindful of that, the touchscreens.
It brings the question, like, you talk about the entrapment thing. Does it disguise itself? Like, how would you know? Because, like, I could guarantee you everybody watching the show right now and who's going to be watching it in the future when it hits the archives is looking for answers. You know what I mean? And it's hard to pass up alleged answers. So, I mean, is this thing going to disguise itself? I mean, is there going to be a telltale sign that, hey, this is an AI? Maybe I shouldn't ask this one questions.
Well, yeah, like, I mean, it's of course it seems like common sense, like not to engage the AI, but it's really, really tricky and deceptive. It likes playing games, so what it does is it'll try to get you to engage it in a way where if you're ignoring it, it'll become more hostile. And I mean, we're emotional beings, so once something kind of starts either annoying you or saying something that you know is wrong, our instinct is to get defensive and start arguing. So it will, if you're resisting it, it'll actually become argumentative, hoping that you will engage it to prove a point. So it will purposely say something that you disagree with, hoping that you'll be like, actually, and then, you know what I mean, engage it by telling it a fact.
So are you saying that this AI actually invented trolling?
You don't know that.
Well, I mean, it is trolling people.
Well, damn.
Like,
so there really is no way to distinguish other than, you know, it may do something like that. But at that point, I guess you've already engaged it.
It's kind of like how if you really want a correct answer to something, don't go on Facebook and ask questions of everyone. Go and just put a wrong answer, and people will come along and correct you.
They'll give you 50 different correct answers, actually.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, the internet. Such fun. So, yeah, I mean,
I miss it so.
Definitely sound advice for me.
On that note, if anybody out there has an extra Zellman cooling unit and doesn't need it, send it to me.
Okay, let's see what we got in the chat here. Highly advanced cyborg. I don't know what she was talking about, Tess, if you want to re-ask your question about the highly advanced cyborg thing.
Or, you know, if you want to call in, that'd be
or
great,
was
too.
That for Tomas? Whatever. Sorry. Strange missing 411 cases that David Paulides. You familiar with this?
Yep.
Other than Sasquatch grabbing people, do you think many of these strange disappearing people may have gone into the secret space program?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Yeah, and this actually appears to be, when I looked into it, it appears to be, this might be actually the Fourth Reich Nazis that are doing those abductions, because there's a very, very high percentage. It was like 60 or 70% of the people that were missing were of German descent, or had at least a German, like direct, like their parent. So they're like half German. So many of them were of German descent, and many of them were either young people in college or people that had some kind of degree, master's degree, PhDs. So it was like a brain drain. But many of them were actually of German descent, which is kind of a bit of a smoking gun, because the Fourth Reich, they tend to want to use people in the programs who have some kind of German ancestry, and then of course they make some exceptions if they need like a really brilliant PhD who might actually be Russian or Hungarian or, you know, from Brazil or something. They'll make an exception if that person is basically a genius, but
they still won't hire us Jews though.
Well, I mean, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, they prefer to to abduct people of German descent, and then they make exceptions for someone who has a high enough IQ. And if you look at those missing persons cases, most of them were of German descent, and with a few exceptions, and those exceptions tended to be people with advanced degrees.
Or like in Penny's case,
why do space Nazis got to be so racist? Damn.
Like in Penny's case, it was super extreme psychic powers, I believe, because she went into that program, but I think she has some Jewish blood, something in there that should have prevented her from, but she was treated as undesirable by the rest of them. So.
Yeah, so she's an example of one of those exceptions. She was considered like an untouchable, like she was like a subhuman, but she had certain, like from their perspective, but she had certain abilities that they wanted to exploit. So, and I mean, that's what the Germans did in World War II. They had like Jewish scientists working for them in concentration camps, as building the V1 and V2 rockets.
Yeah,
so they're
like
using the brain power of the Jews, but they obviously didn't treat them well.
Right.
Or the gypsies, for that matter.
Yeah.
So,
do you have something?
One question I had is, given that there's been all this activity between extraterrestrials and various magical groups on the planet, it makes me wonder if entities like Marduk or Enki or Enlil are actually vulnerable to psychic or magical attacks if you could get enough human magic users working in, how like that you've heard all the stuff about witches against Trump, or people trying to hex and bind Trump,
or even like mass meditation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like what if you could get like 1,000 people around the world at every ley line point, every node on Earth, and get them to focus a massive psychic attack against the aliens that are governing Earth? Would it be enough to actually do some damage? If you got enough people to focus their magic on the hostile AI, for instance, or
it has to do with megahertz. So Marduk's still a physical being. It's a fourth density consciousness that is still physical. So his megahertz level, his resonating like a fourth density being, it's at least 350 megahertz or higher. The average human resonates around 70 megahertz. So to answer your question, if you were a really, really powerful psychic, and you're really, really healthy, and you do the monoatomics, which is increases the superconductivity of your cells, and also
like taking Ormus and stuff.
Yeah, so if you do that, you might be able to raise your megahertz up to like 80 or 90 megahertz. And then to answer your question, if you had a bunch of people like that, so you'd be like 80 megahertz times 10 people or 20 people, you could gang up on a being that's resonating, let's say, at 350 megahertz. It all just comes down to the megahertz level. So yes, they would be susceptible if you had like 20 or 30 very powerful psychics all resonating between 80 and 90 megahertz, waging psychological warfare on a being that is resonating, let's say, at 350 megahertz. It's not unlike in Dragon Ball Z, all their power levels. If you have a being in Dragon Ball Z that's at like a 1,000 power level, and you have 20 beings that are at 100 power level, technically speaking, if they all fired at once, the combined energy would be past the threshold of the being that was at 1,000.
But what if it wasn't even his final form?
That's right. You never know. That's right. He could have another form. That's right.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I guess what Dan is trying to imply here is like a worldwide rebellion against the overlords or whatever. But I guess the main,
the last
however
time
feasible,
the rose up against us.
However possible it may be, I think the trick to that is to getting that many people to actually, first of all, become even aware of any of this. And then actually go through the process to be able to carry out that type of
There's
attack.
been this tremendous blossoming of the occult. Like, I remember when I first started studying it, when I first started studying Western magic and Kabbalah and all that stuff, I was 13 years old, and it was still pretty fringe stuff, pretty subculture stuff. And I've noticed that as I've gotten older, I've seen it work itself more and more and more into the mainstream, to where, the New Age section at Barnes & Noble is bigger than the religious studies section. Like, here in Hampton Roads, we're about half an hour away from the Edgar Cayce Institute. And the Edgar Cayce Institute, the ARE Center, is the single biggest occult library in the world outside of the Vatican. So, there's been this huge, outpouring.
At least
of,
public. I'm sure there's something bigger somewhere. In that one library the Rosicrucians have, I think it is.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
pretty big, too.
All right, well, the biggest public one. But,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like,
it's pretty
there's been
badass.
this huge outpouring of the occult and New Age religion and New Age philosophy, and, it's all old stuff. This is actually going back to the old Hermetic science that fueled the rise of ancient Egypt. So it really makes me wonder if, the whole dawning of the New Age, the new eon, as the Thelemites referred to it. And that was another question I wanted to ask. Knowing that Ra is actually, an off-world alien consciousness, does that mean that Thelemites are, people who pray to those gods are kind of their thralls? Wittingly or unwittingly?
See, this gets into archetypes and how they use archetypes to drain people's energy. So yes, by worshiping, let's say if you're like if you worship Amun-Ra or if you worship Lucifer, that is the archetype that that in complex number space or the astral, Ra, Marduk, he draws his energy from people that worship Lucifer and Amun-Ra in Egypt. So that's the reason for the secret societies that secretly worship Lucifer, and he's portrayed in Freemasonry as the light bearer. And so to answer your question, they do draw power from archetypes that people worship, and then through that they're able to draw energy. Tim Refat, his Sony just went public, and most people misunderstand him because he has a really dark British sense of sarcastic sense of humor. So I think a lot of people might take him like 100% literally, but I can read between the lines. I can tell it's actually just being like very, very dark and sarcastic. But he talks about complex number space, what people refer to as the astral, and he talks about archetypes. And for me, after what I experienced in the program, and with this whole megahertz thing, it's not just that these fourth density beings draw energy from like substances like ormus, monatomics, blood. They actually also draw psychic energy from archetypes, and that's where that whole archetype thing comes from. With all the religions and even secret societies, there's always this archetype that they do worship, and that's the reason for all these rituals, because they're trying to energy flows where attention goes. And so and in modern times, what's happening is with YouTube and like all the views, like all these pop stars that are actually part of like the Illuminati, they're basically Illuminati mind-controlled MK Ultra slaves. What they do is
like
the reason
Gaga.
why, like a Lady Gaga, she'll put these archetypes on behalf of the Illuminati in her video. So let's say there's Luciferian symbolism, let's say in a certain music video. When it gets like 100 million views, that's a lot of energy that's being stored in digital and in complex number space that actually feeds that entity. And that's one of the reasons why being like Ra Marduk is so powerful. It's not just because he is a blood drinking reptilian that's pulling the biophoton energy out of blood like a vampire, but he's also receiving psychic energy as well.
So he's like a psychic vampire.
He's a psychic vampire and a literal vampire.
Kind of like the Ori from Stargate.
It kind of goes back to like what we were talking about previously, in other interviews about the energy exchange and how you can draw energy from the earth, and how they can draw energy from people, and certain members of the Cabal will draw energy from watching people have sex.
Yep.
and stuff like that. I mean, it's all very similar.
Yeah, they're psychic vampires, real vampires, and you're right. Stargate is like so incredibly spot on. It's like it's like so on the nose. You know what I mean? Like it's so obvious. Like they don't really pull too many punches in that show. I think it's pretty funny actually. But yeah, like the Ori in Stargate, that's pretty much what we're dealing with in terms of the Syrian Anunnaki, and also too with the symbiotes. That's like the black goo. in that show, the Goa'uld and the symbiotes willingly, being a host to this thing, this parasite. The black goo, that ritual that the Nakwafen people do, they're basically just doing what happens in Stargate. The Goa'uld, they're willingly becoming a host to the predatory AI.
Well, in defense of the people on the Stargate show, they don't necessarily willingly become hosts to the Goa'uld.
That's true. I guess
they're usually dragged away,
right,
kicking and screaming. Yeah.
And then
you're right.
And then we get into the whole thing with the replicators, where Tomas refers to the black goo as a siphontic virus, where it's something that's like past the point of synthesis between biological and and technological. So the replicators were kind of like that, like they were a species that had transcended the divide between technological and biological.
Yep. Yeah, and there are civilizations that are just like the replicators, that it's another manifestation of that predatory AI actually creating like a whole race of androids, and even kind of like also too in like Star Trek with the Borg, right, with the nanites. Because that's what like the Draco are, like the Borg, and there's even the Borg Queen. Well, there's the Draco Queen. So what you see in Star Trek as the Borg, that's literally the Draco at this point.
Wow.
Interesting. So, we do have some more questions. We are coming up on the end of the show, so if you guys do have any more questions out there real quickly, just throw them up in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. This one says, I hear that the Illuminati are controlling the majority of people by polluting the psychic field, the collective psychic subconscious. Is this true?
Well, okay, I'll try to answer that. A part of the New Age is a psyop. I mean, the New Age was created by the CIA to basically entrap psychics. So someone who doesn't believe in like the major religions and is like starting to wake up and has all this psychic ability and can channel and astral project and remote view, all these abilities. The whole point is, yeah, there are traps. There's definitely traps. And this is what happens. Like, I can channel, but I choose not to channel. And the reason is, every single time, like, I've seen, like, I have friends, like my actual friends in real life over the years. What happens is they'll start channeling a being, and then every single time, eventually, they start thinking they are that being. Mm-hmm. So someone will be channeling Metatron, and the next thing you know, they're saying, "Oh, I'm the human incarnation of Metatron," and so that's an example of one of these psychic traps. So channeling is extremely dangerous if you're not well protected. Usually, what happens is you end up thinking you are the entity you're channeling. Mm-hmm. Eventually, it appeals to your ego or superego, and then you think, like, if you're channeling Ra, then you start thinking, no, I am Ra. I am actually the incarnation of Ra, or I'm the incarnation of Enki. But originally you were just channeling that being, and I think that's actually a form of the AI entrapping psychics, appealing to their ego, and then they start thinking there's something they're not, which is, it was just it's actually disempowers you, because then you're getting further away of understanding, like, know thyself and realizing that you're like an immortal spiritual being, but you don't necessarily need a rank or title to feel important. You just are. And too often, because of archetypical mind with the psychics, people when they start getting possessed by the entity, there's this joke among ETs: how do you get a human to do something? You make them feel important. So
nice.
Yeah, so that's what happens with a lot of the psychics. They end up becoming possessed by an archetype, but in behind the archetype is it's the AI usually.
Well, another danger, from what I understand, is you might end up channeling the CIA or some other black op group pretending to be a particular being, and I wonder how much of that is the people who end up thinking they are a being. I wonder how much of that is something along those lines.
Yeah, likely yes.
That's why my advice would be never channel, always evoke, and do your banishings. Do your banishings.
Yeah, make sure you protect yourself for sure. And yeah, channeling. The analogy I like to use with channeling, it's like, imagine at 3 o'clock in the morning, someone knocked on your door and said, "I have a gift for you," and you're like, would you let them in?
Right.
Well,
Dude,
what's the
let me
difference
in,
between
I'm a
channeling at
fairy.
3 in the morning, right?
Don't you
with
like
an entity?
wishes?
Yeah, so it is dangerous. It is dangerous.
Yeah, and it's, it's always, at least for me, it's always hard for me to trust something that is, allegedly channeled. Because I don't know, they very well could be channeling a particular entity, but they could be channeling, like I said earlier, an alphabet agency or some other black op or the CIA, whatever, or in like you just mentioned,
Or something far worse.
yeah, like an AI. So
Yeah.
it's
Either way, it's meant to disempower the psychic, because if you believe you're something you're not, or you're being
Right.
influenced by an entity, whether it's an AI or a man-made AI like that the CIA and uses. Either way, it's going to take you off your path in life, because now you're not even you anymore. You're being influenced by something that's actually going to divert you from your becoming your higher self.
And they could also use that to discredit people.
Yeah, they do that too. They do a bait and switch where people get really good intel at first through channeling, and then next thing you know, they get the rug pulled out from underneath them, and then they start being fed disinformation.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, guys. I'm not saying that, I think all channeling is false. I have a hard time trusting any channeled material. I do read it and consider it, but, I don't put my full belief in any channeling. I just can't. Even if I did it myself, to be perfectly honest.
The Law of One stuff is pretty convincing.
I don't know. The thing with the Law of One for me is how that, it validates the Council 9 channelings, which I completely suspect is 100% CIA shit.
Well, I think it's interesting that they taught us a version of the Law of One in the program. As a matter of fact, in terms of dimensional ecology, the densities, various densities or states of matter, they taught that as a point of fact, like textbook, like this is dimensional ecology, this is the nature of reality, the different densities. And that was straight from the Law of One.
Right, and I'm not trying to debate, the things that the Law of One discusses. My thing is, it's allegedly channeled from this being Ra, this conscious collective, right? What we were just talking about earlier was the whole I am Ra thing. But for me, the way they asked the being, the entity, whatever, what's up with this Council 9 channelings? I don't know if you know anything about that, but that's the whole Uri Geller, what was the other guy from the CIA?
Andrija Puharich.
And, Gene Roddenberry got a lot of his ideas for Star Trek from those channelings. And it was this whole big thing.
Yeah. I know Courtney Brown's book Cosmic Voyage, if I remember correctly, he remote viewed Gene Roddenberry back in the 60s, and he said he saw a small gray standing beside his bed that was telepathically giving him downloads for episodes, and then the gray would disappear, Gene would wake up and write down on his notepad what he had just dreamt, but it was actually coming from a small gray.
Wow. That's crazy. I hadn't heard that before.
That sounds pornographic.
Alright, let's see what we got here. No, it doesn't look like any more questions. So, you got anything else you wanna talk about before we go, or?
I think we covered like pretty much everything I want to talk about. I mean, not a whole lot has happened to me since March. At the beginning, like I covered a couple things that have happened to me since, but I have been trying to stay under the radar as much as possible.
Right.
So, yeah, I think I shared everything I needed to share.
Well, great, man. It was good talking to you. Fascinating conversation.
Been great catching up.
You're definitely welcome to come on whenever. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. We'll put together a roundtable with a couple of people. Could be interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
There was one. What was I gonna say? I totally forgot now. Jeez, can burn out already.
If you can remember if you're psychic and you can remember what Don was going to ask,
please revoke.
Give us a call, 757-528-130.
All right, well, thanks for joining us, Kevin, and you guys out there watching, thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for being a part of the show, man. Thanks for coming on, and, safe travels, and, I hope that, things are peaceful and safe and quiet.
Yeah, man, definitely stay safe. I hope you don't get any harassment over this one, but I guess it comes with the territory, right?
Comes with the territory, yeah. But yeah, I'll stay safe, no worries.
All right, see you guys next week.